do, but the fact that now apparently if you craft too many items, or if you pick up too many items, or if you break down too many items for parts besides the crafting or picking up too many items, apparently it can corrupt your save data. And this is ever since I got this game after the first patch, it's just been a constant issue with my game. Luckily though, I can actually load the game and not be stuck not being able to play the game due to a corrupt save file. But so far it seems like if I craft a certain amount of items, or if I go over that 8 gigabyte save data limit, it corrupts my file. And so far, ever since the first patch, I've had this issue with a corrupt save file from going over that 8 gigabytes, megabytes, whatever it is, limit. That once you go over that limit, which I think is 8 something, and your save file gets corrupt. And now I've been dealing with nothing but a corrupt save file. Of course, I'm lucky though, is because it still lets me play the game, because it does something that doesn't prevent me from not being able to load up the save file, because it reverts back to a different state, where I guess it isn't corrupt. But the fact that I can just get a corrupt save file altogether just from picking up items or crafting items is ridiculous for an RPG game that is focused on you being able to actually be interactive with your environment within the game and with the people and with the items that they drop. Like, I don't know what they were thinking to give you actually a limit on a limit size for data on a save file, and a game that just like I said, is focused on you being able to interact within the environment and within the items that are dropped on the ground from the people you defeat. Like, why would you actually give a limit in a game like that? I can understand if it was a game that's not really as interactive with the environment or with the items that are dropped from enemies that you defeat, and it's more focused purely on a story-driven game. But a game isn't just story-driven. It's not just a story-driven game. It's a very interactive game within your environment, and then the items that you can pick up from enemies you defeat. So in this kind of game, I don't understand why they would actually give you a limit to a save file and then allow it to get corrupt once you go over that limit. And like I said, there's glaring issues with this game. Honestly, there's been a lot of bugs, a lot of glitches, a lot of lagging when it comes to the frame rate. I've seen it where I've gone in certain areas where the frame rate has been consistent, but as soon as I leave that area going into a different area, it's like that frame rate drops dramatically to the point where things take like a few minutes when it comes to the pixels of the characters to actually load appropriately, or in a rate that's actually coherent enough for you. When you go into a different area, things are already are loaded, and the textures are all there and loaded into the next area that you go into. And I've seen it countless times. It's when I am in one area and there's that consistent frame rate. As soon as I leave that area and go into a different area, all of a sudden that fucking frame rate drops dramatically, and it's like the textures and the pixels and all that stuff aren't even loaded in by the time I get into that new area of the game, and that frame rate drops dramatically, where it's like I actually have to wait like a minute or so just for the textures and for the pixels to actually appear in the game and be fully loaded into the area that I'm in, that I currently just went into. So that's kind of ridiculous. Besides the corrupt the save file limit on how much data the game can save for the file, which is actually ridiculous too. So I'm really not liking those two things. That kind of gets me a little annoyed. And then I have seen like objects within other objects is another glitch that I've seen besides the two that I just mentioned, and that's kind of ridiculous too. So honestly, there's still a lot of issues with this game. Like I said though in my other videos, I'm sure the developers will get to it and patch it up when I get the chance. It's kind of getting a little irritating though, because as much as I love the game and as much as I have found ever since I've learned about this year about CD Projekt Red, when it comes to just the overall lore of Cyberpunk, when it comes to the tabletop game and the video game of 2077, I've always started to really get into it and felt like the lore of Cyberpunk, whether it's the tabletop game, if it's Red, if it's 2020, or or so forth, I've actually got really intrigued with the lore of Cyberpunk. And I actually plan on actually playing the tabletop game because, and I do like Dungeons and Dragons, and I kind of like that there's elements of Cyberpunk in, that kind of have some kind of connection in the sense of just the overall structure of D&D and how there's some similarities between Cyberpunk and then D&D. So I kind of like that. I kind of like the fact like D&D has been very interactive with. You can be very interactive with the world and your environment within that world. Love the fact that that Cyberpunk is kind of the same concept. And that's what I like about this game. Just because I find the lore intriguing, and I do find the fact that you can really interact within the environment and talk, and the people that you're kind of connected with is wonderful, and it gives a lot of depth to the game, and it gives usually a lot of depth to a story. So and I kind of like that. Of course, like I said, I do like the fact that it's mature. I do like the fact that there's violence, there's nudity, there's sex scenes, there's just the fact that it's a mature game besides drug use, sexual themes, and then violence and gore. So I kind of like that about the game too, besides the fact that I find the lore of Cyberpunk very intriguing, and how I like the fact that there's similar construct and to comparison into D&D with the fact like the environment is very interactive, and just overall how like you really can kind of customize the game and kind of really feel like you're part of that universe, and you can and it's really up to you how much you want to be connected into that realm or that universe or that city or and so forth. So I like the game. I've been enjoying the game quite a bit for all the reasons that I've mentioned. I am just annoyed at the fact that the game came out with it being as buggy and glitchy as it is. I understand the people that are backing the game up, the investors are kind of a little annoyed because of how often this game has been delayed. Because this game was originally not even going to be going out to, in the new next generation consoles. When this game was first announced, it was only focused that it would be on current gen consoles. And the only reason why it went to next-gen consoles is because they'd already delayed it once or twice. And by that time, it was announced that these new generation consoles were coming out this year. So originally, it wasn't even supposed to be coming out for, for the next-gen consoles, this game, for Cyberpunk, and that it was just going to be primarily focused on PC and the current-gen consoles. So that kind of annoys me because, like, out of the blue, as soon as they delayed it, after the first time or the second time, then they mentioned that they were going to bring it to next-gen consoles. They basically put even more work on their plate when it seemed like they were already struggling in development just to focus on the current-gen consoles to make sure that that game, when it was released, it wouldn't be broken or didn't have glitches or bugs. So the fact that they're like, oh, well, now we want to make it because we delayed it once or twice, and now that we found out that next-gen consoles are coming out this year, now out of the blue we want to make it for those consoles as well, besides current-gen consoles. So they pretty much added more on their plate instead of just waiting to actually make it for next-gen consoles once they focused and they made sure that the games that they were originally working on for the consoles, which was PlayStation 4 and the Xbox current-gen consoles, instead of taking that time to focus on, this generation consoles like originally they were planning to, and focusing on making sure the game ran smoothly when it came to the textures, when it came to the different areas that the game has to load when you go into them, and just make sure that there's no glitches and bugs. Instead of focusing on that, and then after making sure that once the game for current gen consoles for this game was released on, and making sure that there was actually they ran smoothly and correctly, instead of doing that and then waiting to focus on next gen consoles, and then primarily putting all their energy and focus on those consoles, they decided to jam all those consoles together instead of continuing just working on the current consoles, making sure the game was correctly running appropriately, making sure there was no bugs and glitches, releasing the current gen consoles like they were originally planning to before they had first or second delay, and then releasing those, and then focusing on the next gen consoles. and the fact, like, the first delay for the current gen consoles when they were really focusing on the current gen consoles and the game of development of the game, and like that already shows you significantly enough that, and just the fact, like, before they even announced that they were going to put it on next gen consoles, that they were already struggling with fucking current gen consoles, and that they were having issues with development, and that things were taking longer than they expected. So the fact is, like, you want to all of a sudden put more on their plate when they've already are trying to get through the fact that that it's apparent that they're having some slight technical difficulties with just the current gen consoles, and making sure the game is going to come out and run appropriately or correctly, instead of just focusing on current gen consoles. They put more work on their plate with, like I said, next gen consoles after the first or second delays, when they announced that, oh well, now since the next gen consoles are coming out this year, we're going to put more work on our plate, and then now making it for those consoles as well, instead of originally when we first announced the game that it was only going to come out for current gen consoles. Instead of focusing on those consoles and making sure the game was actually running good and smoothly and correctly and appropriately before the game was released, and making sure that there was no bugs and glitches, and that way they would actually have, it was just stupid. That way they can actually make sure the fans were happy with the game, and and it didn't fall in the same situation as games like Anthem and Marvel Avengers. And instead they decided to shoot themselves in the foot by adding more work on their plate when, and they were already in issues with the first delay before they announced that it was coming out on next-gen consoles, that they were already having issues in development when it came to the game. So, like, I don't understand where their idea was, why they thought it was a good idea. They were probably thinking instead of having the mind frame of being consumer friendly, they were probably thinking, well, we can get more money if we throw it on next-gen consoles, even though we're already not really ready with the current-gen consoles, and add more work on our plate for the developers. Like, and they were probably thinking, oh, well, it's because if we put it on more consoles, we can probably make more revenue and more money. Well, yeah, sure, but at the same time, you're not changing the deadline. You're trying to make the deadline the same for the game to be released, but then you're adding on additional work when the work that they had before the additional work you were giving them, they already were having technical issues and difficulties with the work that they had before the extra work you gave them. Like, and you think there's not going to be any situations or issues? Like, come on, man. Like, that's just stupid. And like I seen on YouTube about the grind, how and they had to grind a bit more ever since they announced that they were going to be bringing that on all platforms, even more because they were already having some slight technical difficulties in development with just the current gen consoles before the first or second delay, before they announced that they were going to put it on next gen consoles as well. And when they first announced the game, it was fully focused on primarily current generation consoles. So that was just a stupid, idiotic move. Like I'm saying, what they should have done was not announce that they were going to bring it on next-gen consoles. Focus on what they first announced, which was just putting it on current-gen consoles. Not giving them that extra work to bring it on all of a sudden after first or second delay to bring it on next-gen consoles as well, so they can take that time and effort to focus primarily only on current-gen consoles like originally they were going to do before the delays. That way when they release the fucking current-gen console versions of the game, it would actually run smoothly, and it would be performed, optimized for those systems. And that you want to get the glitches, you want to get the bugs, you want to get the frame drops every time you go into a new area that this game is going through right now. But they decided to put more work on their plate when they weren't really quite ready for just what they were doing before the first delay, and the systems and the consoles that they were primarily focusing on originally, and added more work on their plate when they couldn't even handle in their first announcements of the goals that they had in mind. So that was just idiotic. Honestly, what they should have done was wait to put it on all consoles, current gen and next gen. Focus on the current gen like they originally were going to do. Make sure the game ran smoothly, correctly. Make sure that it was optimized for these systems. Release the game once they realized that they were in a state that they were able to release the current gen games like they originally planned to do before the delays that they announced, when they realized that all of a sudden after the first second delay that the new next gen consoles were coming out this year, they should have just focused on what they originally were going to do, which is the current gen consoles, make sure the games ran smoothly, they were optimized for the system, that there was no glitches, no bugs, or very minimal amount of glitches and bugs that can be settled within like the first week of patches. Primary, but it would have been best if there was none at all. But usually, even when companies these days that I've seen, even when I do focus on current gen consoles or a very limited amount of consoles or a PC, they still come out with bugs. But the reason why I feel like they came out with more glitches and bugs than normally is because, and they were already struggling with just focusing on the current gen consoles. And when they're already struggling, they just got all of a sudden more fucking work thrown on their plate to make a game for current next-gen consoles as well, when they were already having issues when just focusing on the current-gen consoles before the delays. So, and what they should have done was hold off the current next-gen consoles, focus on what they said they were going to do with the primary consoles of this generation, make sure the game came out smoothly, correctly. Once the game was released, then focus on the development of next-gen consoles for this game. And that way, at least when the current gen consoles came out with, which was their original plan when they first announced the game, and not all of a sudden add more work on their plate after the first or second delay when they realized the next gen consoles were coming out this year, they would have had a game that people were happy about, that probably still most likely had a PlayStation 4. Because yes, there are people going out buying PlayStation 5s that can afford a PlayStation 5, but you know what, not everybody can, and some people are actually still satisfied playing their games on the PlayStation 4 and don't mind the minute differences of power or performance between PlayStation 4 when it comes to the current gen consoles and the next gen consoles. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that still have their PlayStation 4s that would have been happy with using that PlayStation 4 if they had to, if they really enjoyed the game and were anticipating the game and highly had the game hyped in their mind, wouldn't mind using the current gen consoles if it meant that they could play the game that ran appropriately, smoothly, and correctly, and actually was optimized for the system. So what they should have done, and it's just focus on PlayStation 4, current gen consoles, Xbox. Once that game was released, because I'm sure, like I said, people were hyped for the game in their minds and they were anticipating the game very highly. I'm sure they wouldn't mind going to their current gen consoles because they probably have a lot more games on their current gen consoles than they do for their next gen consoles. So they should just focus on releasing the game for this generation, for this current gen consoles. Make sure the game ran smoothly on all the current gen platforms and PC. Release the game, but it would have had a lot less work on their plate that was additional to what they were originally planning to do during the first steps of production and development. It would have had a lot less work. They would have been able to focus on making sure before the game was released that it ran good and well, and that it wouldn't be a complete buggy, broken down, glitchy mess, a broken game. And then once the game was released, and it would have had a better game for current gen consoles, that they probably wouldn't have to go through as much hassle to patch and fix if there was bugs, and it would probably be a lot less than what it is now because they decided to focus on all the consoles. And then if they did it that way, they could eventually they could have focused on the next gen consoles and put their development on that, which would probably be a lot more simplistic, because like I said, the fact that before they even announced that they were going to bring it on next gen console, they only announced that after the first or second delay, when they first announced the game, the plan was to put it on current gen console only and PC. And the fact that they had to make delay before even the fact that they only announced that they were going to bring on next gen consoles after the first second delay, kind of says, if you're already struggling with just, making a game for the current gen consoles and PC, why wish you had more work on your plate when what you originally announced about the game was you were already having difficulties with it, and then why would you add more work on top of that because you want, oh my god, just stupidity, honestly. And then what was hilarious, there was a third or fourth delay that they're like, well, the game's golden, but we want to optimize it to make sure that it's optimized for all the systems. Well, what was the whole point of saying, well, that it makes a difference, and that extra 3 weeks makes a difference after the third or fourth delay, that we want to make sure the game runs smoothly on all the platforms before we release the game, and we want to test it on all platforms. And now we're on our third or fourth delay, announcing that that we want to make sure the game is optimized for all platforms, and that we have a lot of platforms to test it on, and that these 3 weeks are going to make a difference. But then when the game comes out, it seems like it's still like there's that time that they took didn't really make much of a difference. Like, there's still tons of glitches and bugs on the current gen consoles on PC, and the only game that actually seems to be somewhat good is if you have a high-end PC or a PlayStation 5. But even PlayStation 5 and the current gen consoles are announcing that there's bugs and glitches, maybe not as significant as in current gen consoles. But why would you delay the game like for the third or fourth time to say that you want to optimize its performance for all platforms and do testing for all platforms to make sure the game's running smoothly and that is optimized, but then you still release a game that pretty much every system, current gen and next gen consoles, are having bugs and glitches on? Like, what was the point? Even then, saying that the game went gold doesn't even make any sense, because like the definition of what I've seen, it means that the game is ready and it can be like it's good, it's running the way it's supposed to be running, it's finished, completed, has all that, everything in the game that you want in the game, and then it's ready to be mass produced. So why even announce that it's gone gold? Honestly, like, oh my god. Like I said, I love the game. It's a fun game. I enjoy the game a lot. It's something that I've enjoyed when it comes to just learning about the lore this year. Ever since I found out about this game, and then the tabletop game as well. I didn't even realize this was based off a tabletop game, but I've been looking at the tabletop games as well, and I find that they're very intriguing because I always like D&D. I like how interactive the world is, how interactive characters are, and how unique you can make your characters, and just how much freedom that you have with development of your character creation. So like, those were things that, and besides, and it being a mature game that I was really anticipating about this game, besides having sexual themes, the nudity, partial nudity, the violence, the gore, suggestive themes, and was the fact like it was going to be a very immersive world that you can really interact with, and that you can really have a lot of freedom and control over character creation, and so I like the fact like that's kind of what like I said, what I liked about D&D for those reasons, and that's kind of what I like about Cyberpunk. The fact that it's based off a tabletop game that kind of allows you that kind of control and freedom. Maybe really anticipating this game and what they were going to do in this game and how they were going to implement like a kind of control over your character creation and that kind of freedom over an environment that you can interact with. And besides the nudity, partial nudity, sexual themes, drug use, violence, and gore, and like that was why I was really anticipating this game and looking forward into playing it, and why my anticipation was high. But this game has been a complete, like, absolute wreck and mess for its development. Just because, like I mentioned, the amount of delays that they've had even before. I think it was only one delay, and then they announced that they were going to bring it on the next gen consoles as well. It was either one or two delays. Then they mentioned after that they're going to bring on next gen console. But the fact is, before they were even going to do that, and they and had to delay once or twice before they announced that they were going to bring on next gen console, tells you that the current gen console, which what they were planning to release it on before they were planning on releasing on next gen console, it shows that they were already having technical difficulties in development of just the original platform that they announced that they were going to release on during the beginning of development for this game. So why would you throw more work on your plate when you already know that you're having technical issues with your first announcement of what systems you were going to put it on, which was the focus was just originally current gen consoles. So why would they add more work on their plate like that? Like, especially when they were having troubles reaching that deadline of the game being released. Like, that just makes no sense at all. I'm sorry, it does not make any sense. If you're already struggling to meet a deadline to release a game when your original plan was to release it on current consoles, and obviously because of delays, it shows, like I said, that you're obviously struggling and you're having technical difficulties in development with your original announcement of putting it on current gen consoles, and that is obvious because of the delays and the messages you left explaining those delays are showing that you're having development difficulties, technical difficulties of a game that was originally announced to release on current consoles. Why was you all of a sudden, after the first or second delay, when you realize that it's coming out, the next gen consoles are coming out this year, that all of a sudden you would give yourself more work to put it on next gen consoles when you're obviously clearly showing during delays and reasoning with your messages behind your delays that you're already struggling with your original plan of releasing it on current gen consoles? Why would they give themselves more work on top of that? Like, that's just dumbfounded. Honestly, it really is. Like I said, what they should have done was they should have focused on their original plan, released it on current gen consoles, focus on that, and then once the game was released, you would have had a lot more time and a lot more time. You would have a lot more time, a lot more freedom to focus on the current gen consoles, which was your original announcement. And you would have actually been able to would have been a lot more easier to meet that deadline. You would have probably been able to release the game with a lot less bugs and glitches and frame drops. And then if you did have to patch it, it would probably be a very small, insignificant patch, maybe a quick one-time patch or maybe something like that. But instead, they gave themselves more work when obviously the current work previously they couldn't really handle and meet those deadlines without some kind of technical difficulties or development difficulties, and then they had to decide to throw more work on top of that. Like, that's just stupid. It is. I'm sorry about that. It's just dumbfounded. It's idiotic. And like I said, what I would have done was I would have actually, once the game for current gen and PC was released, then I would have focused on development of, in the next gen consoles, and then release those games separately. I try and release all the game for every single platform on the same date. That was stupid. Honestly. They could have fucking easily put off the play next gen console game version of the games, because I'm sure a lot of people still have their PlayStation 4s and their current gen consoles when it comes to their Xbox PlayStation 4s. There's still plenty of games that they enjoy playing on that current gen system. So I'm sure, and people wouldn't have mind waiting, in a few extra months to get the game on current next gen consoles if it meant that current gen consoles, like when they originally announced the game that they were going to release it on, was running appropriately and correctly and smoothly. Then they could have released the current gen consoles, gave themselves a few extra months that they needed to work on next gen consoles, and then released the next gen consoles early in the year of 2021. That way, when they released that game on next gen consoles, if there was bugs, once again, like if they would have been very minimal, and it would have been probably just a one quick patch. But now they have to make these huge, gigantic patches because they try to make all the games released on the same day for every single platform. And then because of that, they gave themselves more work when they were already having difficulties and struggles, in development of their original plan, which was to release the game on current gen consoles. Give themselves more work, try to throw all the games out on the same day for every platform, and then every game now on a platform is practically a mess, unless if you have a high-end computer or if you have like a PlayStation 5. But even, like I said, even the PlayStation 5s and the new console systems, next-gen console systems, have reported that there's still bugs with them. So you basically shot yourselves in the foot. And I know I was saying, like, I love the game. I still love the game despite the bugs and the glitches and the frame rates. It is absolutely frustrating as hell sometimes going through the missions. I think, like, this is the only game that's given me a headache playing it as much as I love the game. Every game that I play that has had these issues, because and they weren't putting more work on their plate than they can handle. They had some bugs, but it was never as significant as freaking Cyberpunk 2027, because and they didn't put more on their plate than they can handle. When it came to other games, even though they were released with bugs and glitches, it was never as severe as Cyberpunk, because Cyberpunk put way too much work on their plate when they were already struggling with what they already had on their plate, and then made a complete mess over their dish. Now, people are trying to say it can be the publisher's fault, it could be management's fault, it could be developers' fault, but whoever's fault it is, I don't want to say that it's just the publishers for putting pressure on the developers or management not managing the time that they had for the developers, and having a good, clear and good communication with their investors. Honestly, I think it's all everybody's kind of fault, and everybody had a hand in developing this game. And I think, it was, like I said in my other videos of this game, it was just poor communication, poor management, and pressure being thrown on everybody. And if it wasn't pressure from the investors being thrown on management, it was management throwing pressure on the developers getting frustrated and angry and feeling pressured to make the game. And I think the people that are least to blame for the game is probably the developers, and I think it is probably most likely, and maybe it's the investors or maybe the management, for the amount of pressure that everybody had. But overall, I think it was just a lack of communication and a lack of appropriate time of use. And those are two things, and lack of communication, lack of appropriate time of use, and just putting way too much expectation on the game and putting too much on the plate. And when it was clear that there was already enough on the plate that the game was struggling with, and then throwing more stuff on the plate that clearly made it even a huge mess, instead of and letting what was on the plate be smoothly be looked at carefully, analytically, and correctly. Now, of course, this game can be fixed, because I'm sure they're going to come out with patches, and I hope they do come out with patches. I hope they kind of take the time to really analyze the game, find out what exactly is wrong with all the platforms it's on, and even if it does take them a bit of time, if they put the effort into actually looking, analyzing all the platforms, and looking at the game and its performance on all the platforms, and that they actually do take the time that is required and needed to patch these issues and bugs and glitches, I'll be happy. But I hope they actually take the time and effort, and then can properly adjust or manage their time to put those patches out to fix those glitches, bugs, and frame rate drops from going into different areas, where by the time you get into the areas, none of the textures are loaded up while you're actually within that area that you just moved to. So I think, and if you give them enough time and they get the adequate time required to patch the game for all the platforms it's on, I'm sure they can do it. But and this wouldn't have been the issue, this wouldn't have been the case if there was clear communication, time management used correctly, and that they already made sure that they were working with what they can handle and not more than what they were able to actually handle. If those were three things that were done in that manner, this game probably wouldn't have come out as broken as it is. But because and the three things that I mentioned were not appropriately done, very ethically, in an appropriate way, this game has come out with tons of glitches, tons of bugs, tons of frame drops for all the platforms, except maybe for a high-end PC. So yeah, this game has come out as a mess. But that's all. Those are all the cons and all my frustrations about the game. I think I've already went over about what I love about the game. I love the fact that it's a character that gives you a lot of it's a game that gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of control over your character creation. That's one thing I like. You really have a lot of things you can do with your character when it comes to the creation. And I love how interactive the world is, and how and there's all these characters you can build a relationship with and that you can interact with. and how like people you kill, you can interact with what's on their bodies and pick up loot. So I love the fact that there's good control and freedom over character creation. And I love the fact like the world is very interactive, and you can really build those relationships within your environment and the people within this world of Cyberpunk. I also, from playing this game, I also learned a bit more about the tabletop, and I love the lore with the tabletop. Because I also do enjoy D&D, although I'm not the greatest when it comes to the role-playing at D&D. I do love the fact, like I said, about how much control and freedom you have over your character in D&D, and how interactive your environment can be within that realm. So I kind of like D&D, even though like I said, I'm horrible at role-playing in D&D. So. But I do like it, and of course, like I said, I do love the fact that it's mature. I do love the fact that there is nudity, sexual themes, violence, gore, and that it's the game that I feel like I'm appropriate for my age, because it has the sexual themes, nudity, the gore, the violence, suggestive themes, drug use, and so forth. And I've also enjoyed the story so far. And building the relationships. So overall, I like the game. I love the game quite a bit, actually. It's just going through all these glitches and bugs and frame rate drops every time I go into a different area, not seeing the pixels loaded up as soon as I'm in that new area is giving me a headache at times, and it is extremely frustrating to deal with. But I try and bear with it because I do love the game and I do enjoy the game. But there are definitely clear issues, problems, glitches and bugs and frame rates, and and the whole corrupt save data issue that this game has. So I hope at some point developers can actually fix the game, that they can bring out the patches by and at least by next year or January if it goes to January. But I'm hoping at some point within the end of this year or very, very early January or in February, that they can get this game into a state where it actually runs and is optimized for every platform and system it's on. And I think if you do give the developers enough time, and you give the company of CD Projekt Red enough time to correct these issues when it comes to bugs and glitches and the frame rate drops from going into new areas and not having the texture and pixels loaded up by the time you enter that new area, and correct the corrupt save game data issue, and I think this game will be wonderful. I think it would have been the best game of the year. But unfortunately, I don't think this stuff's going to be corrected until maybe January, beginning of January, or sometime early February, because there's a lot of platforms that they need to work on, because this game kind of came out busted and broken for almost every platform. So hopefully by then they can correct the game, and then people can be happy and satisfied. But right now, as much as I want to say this game is the game of the year and deserves the reward for game of the year, not with how buggy it's been, not with how many glitches it's been, not with how much often the frame rate drops just every time you go into a new area that has to load up the data and the corrupt save game data. Like, if it, and if it wasn't for those issues, I definitely feel like this game would have been the game of the year, or at least a very close contender or runner-up to game of the year. But not with the current state that this game is on all the different platforms.
You are V. We have been waiting.
They gave me away. It's the hair, isn't it? Making sure I didn't get lost. contact? Soon you're finally gonna tell me about this job?
I'm just a man in the middle. You will learn more. Soon.
Wanna talk with Brigitte. She here somewhere?
No. Shopping center by the intersection. Go to the butcher shop there. Ask for Placide. He will tell you the details.
Hey, watch it.
Animals are the craziest fucking gang in this city.
Looking for Placide.
Placide. Gardez ici, là.
Dodo ti petite maman. Dodo ti petite
Ici,
maman.
gardez.
Si ou pas dodo, cobla va manger. Si ou pas dodo, cobla va manger.
Vous voulez entrer?
Maman ou pas
C'est vous-même.
là,
Continuez.
allez dans ma chérie.
Placide, gardez là.
Papa ou pas là, allez arriver.
Placide? Told me at the chap.
Pacifica,
Where are we headed?
a hotbed of controversy, a city within the
Tournez,
city.
vous nous dehors.
A dirty
C'est
slang
pas.
of night cities.
Tournez notre villa. Nous c'est Pacifica.
Welcome to Pacifica. This way. Pacifica well?
Nah. You guys aren't exactly great at rolling out the welcome mat for outsiders.
Was to be its own city where suits were burned the edict. Our interest is now in the GIM, the Grand Imperial Mall. Pacifica's biggest, ugliest temple to greed. But never finished. Until last week, it was deserted. Empty.
But now?
The animals crawled there, made a nest.
Hey, Placide! Mwen gen sa ou te bay lot!
Ok, mwen pal vini, Peter.
Lovely.
Placide, petit mwen.
Ou,
Ou pat bezwen. Gen lot ki gen li pi mal.
Peter. Mwen sa se pou. Ma pon non pou yon espos.
Mersi. Placide, ou gen yon mimi?
Pa jodi ya.
Me ou te di?
Vita Emily, mwen pa pliye. You deal with animal before?
Yeah. A few times. You want the animals out of the gym? Extinct? That why you hired me?
You learn everything soon.
I mean, it makes no sense them being here. Middle of Pacifica, no backup, cut off. It's your turf. Hell, even badges don't patrol around here.
Uh-huh.
They're trying to provoke you? Make you do something stupid?
They do not leave GIM.
How many we talking about in there?
30, maybe more. Vinina, we talk here. You sit.
When do I see Brigitte?
You do job. That is first. What the hell?
Could fucking tell me what you plan to do first.
You take job. You do what I say. So you jack in. Now.
Damn it. Here goes nothing.
Well, at least he's not likely to talk your ears bloody.
Why not send your own goons to the gym?
This not our way.
How's that been working out for you?
Work good. Good more than bad. Your calm shaman, it is Victor.
Is that at all relevant? Nah. Once inside, what do I do?
The camionette. 2035 07. 3 seconds before, poof. We try to learn where the camionette come from.
Tech looks pretty advanced. Doesn't scream meathead to me.
They watch it very close. It is important, whatever it
Placide.
is.
Batman Kelly ap desen anko yi?
Fais-moi porte là.
Animals aren't the play here, are they? They're hired muscle. Someone else needed them. Someone with a van full of Netrunner tech. And that's where I come in? To sniff out who?
Start with the camionette. Hide from all eyes. Only see the situation. You have now seen with Rezo Agwe, our subnet.
Why? What for?
You are my vessel now. To Agwe, I see what you see. Hear what you hear. I will guide you through GIM.
Another voice in your head. Just what the Ripper Doc ordered.
So, aim to keep an eye on me. Shows trust. All right. Anything else I should know?
Find our people near Mall. They will show you how to get inside the beast.
Got it. No.
People.
All ears. What?
I checked stability. The link on your end clear?
Mm-hmm. Seems so.
You can burn and die on your own time, not on mine.
Is it true what they say? That you're a deserter?
They are my people. Talk with them.
You, V?
Know the way in? Anything?
Get to work.
Fuck you, but I'm all jittery and shit. Everything pisses me off. Get that dirty shit!
I ain't taking this anymore.
Ах ты гнида!